Have you enjoyed yourselves? I don't think that all the audiences watching from MSNBC can hear you, and all the networks that are watching, 100 media outlets are here from around the world, 40 countries. Have you enjoyed yourselves? President Bill Clinton lives on energy, and he lives on the vitality and the authenticity of people. So I'm not quite sure if he felt that. I think he's somewhere in the building. Maybe one more time. Did you enjoy yourselves? Yeah. I got a feeling he heard that one. The Bible suggests, be hot or be cold. If you're lukewarm, I'll spat you out. Translation, even God is not like mediocrity. There's nothing mediocre about this man. You can't help but love him because he just oozes authenticity. He gives you a deep sense that he cares and he believes. And even when you can push for some disagreement, you will never find him disagreeable. He really epitomizes the phrase that I love so much that Ambassador Andrew Young, my hero, and Reverend Dr. Cecil Chip Murray taught me, the man who raised me. Talk without being offensive. Listen without being defensive. But always leave even your adversary with their dignity. When the people you ran against for President of the United States of America, 2 generations of them in the other party, at the level of the presidency, consider you their son and their brother, the Bush family, you know you're a bad brother. That really epitomizes what I love most about him. He's trying to bring everybody together. And he loves results. He loves problems with beginnings, middles, and ends. There's a legacy that he has that makes him, in my opinion, one of the 2 best presidents we've ever had on economic empowerment. Ever. President Abraham Lincoln has credit for the Freedmen's Bank. You've heard me say it. The 1865, the bank created to teach free slaves about money. And we have great presidents who've done great things with civil rights. President Johnson does not get the credit he deserves as an example. But when you come to economic empowerment of the poor, and you want to get specific, the new market tax credit, the work to revive South Central Los Angeles after the Rodney King riots, the work in Arkansas to put a bank in place there to empower people and teach people how to fish, the creation of legislation around the CDFI fund to really ramp up CDFIs in this country. You heard of Muhammad Yunus, you heard of the Grameen Bank. What you may not know is that nobody had heard of Muhammad Yunus or the Grameen Bank before President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton identified that as the next big trend, held him up on a stage, put him out as a profile, and within 10 years, he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner and a profile and a model for the world. Everybody needs a sponsor. And you've heard me talk about the earned income tax credit, where 1 out of 4 Americans who qualify for it never ask for it. $10 billion a year go back to the federal treasury. But the $50 billion that's made available, that's not about a handout, it's about a hand up for working families to help them help themselves. That's all President Bill Clinton. People say, well, is he a liberal president? Was he a conservative president? No, he was a get-it-done president. And our economy grew because he made sure everybody in America participated in our system. He opened the economy up, lifted people up, inspired people to do better, and created an environment where free enterprise works for all. I'm going to stop because I love this man. He is literally my favorite public service representative in the world, not a politician. A lot of people, elected officials, are politicians. They're 25% public servant, 75% politician. Hear me now. He's 75% public servant and by necessity, 25% politician, because he's got to get the job done. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make it clear how honored we are to have the President of the United States of America, of the world, Bill Clinton, with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I really like John, but he's just so laid back. Ice water in his veins, you never know what he feels. I want to thank him for asking me to come today, and Ambassador Andrew Young, thank you for being here and for being my friend for so many years. And Mayor Reed, thank you for welcoming me back to Atlanta. And Mayor Mike Duggan from Detroit, thank you for beginning what I am convinced will be a major American miracle, bringing back Detroit. And thanks for letting me try to help. My wonderful former Secretary of Transportation, Rodney Slater, thank you. And thank you, Ambassador Muthambama of Rwanda, a place where it is my great honor to work on many of the things that you care about here, and all the other dignitaries who are here. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I have been working with John Hope Bryant for a very long time. And I asked several people on the way in, see, here's a great thing. Somebody will, if you're not in office, great thing is you can say whatever you want. Unless your wife might run for something, then you got to be more careful. But look, I want to show you something. Look, let me show you something. So here's what they wrote and here's what I wrote. I'm going to have to put my glasses on. But I'm going to begin with something I thought I would end with. Because the first person I asked today, I said, what do you think I ought to say? And they said, well, tell them what they do matters. In 2007, I wrote a book on the non-governmental movement which is sweeping the world. That's what Operation Hope is. It's what is called in short terms an NGO, a non-governmental organization. People that try to step into the gap between what the private sector would otherwise produce and the government could otherwise provide. And at a time when all the bad headlines take precedent, and there's plenty to be worried about, one of the great good news stories of the 21st century is the explosion of non-governmental organizations. There are more than 1 million foundations in the United States alone. Steve Case, thank you for what you do with yours. More than half of them have been established in the last 20 years. There are 250,000, 300,000 registered in China, including the staggering one now that will be registered as a result of Alibaba going public. But there are probably twice that many active there. There are more than 500,000 in India. This idea that private citizens can do public good is very important. But John Hope Bryant's been at it longer than most people. So in 2007, I wrote this book about this whole trend, trying to get people like you all over America excited about it. And I went back to an interview I had done with him a couple of years earlier, and I asked his permission to use it. And I don't want to embarrass him, but he would never say it just like this. So this is exactly what he said to me. I asked him why he decided to devote his life to Operation Hope. quote. This is exactly what he said. I don't know if I decided. In 1992, I was 26 and financially successful, but I wasn't happy. When the Los Angeles riots broke out after Rodney King was beaten, I was appalled by the indifference to the plight of people without hope. I wanted to change hearts and minds, to teach poor people to live with hope, and to persuade people with money to invest in them and their children, homes, and businesses, not out of charity, but enlightened self-interest. I started Operation Hope out of guilt, pain, and the need to heal myself. I keep doing it because the key to happiness is to stop focusing on me and start focusing on we. My family still has everything we need, and I feel lucky that I made my decision at 26 instead of waiting till I was 70. So are we lucky that he didn't wait till he was 70. I thank you. So the first thing I want to tell you is this conference matters. It matters because in America and all over the world there is growing inequality as the gains from technology-fueled wealth generation and the ability of money to make money for itself create a widening gap in opportunity, while intelligence, effort, and aspiration are evenly distributed. I have found that people can endure almost any kind of hardship and by and large do not resent other people's success as long as they think they can do better, as long as they think they can give their kids a better deal, as long as they think tomorrow can be different from yesterday. What kills people is not adversity. What kills people is thinking every tomorrow is going to be just like yesterday and there's not a darn thing they can do about it. And so when John started Operation Hope and you were having this global hope forum, it's really about telling people you can control your own destiny, you can participate in the market economy, you can be rewarded in a positive way for your intelligence and effort and entrepreneurialism. You have something to look forward to when you get up in the morning. That's why you're here. Because what the government does is important, and what individual wealth creators do on their own is terrifically important. But somebody has to step into the gaps because of the inherent limitations of a market on automatic, and I'll say more about that in a minute. So I want to thank all the partners. I want to mention one, Jim Clifton from the Gallup organization, because he wrote a great book on the global jobs crisis. And he is, and the book deals with, as do a number of others, a question that we are not going to resolve today because we are so far from maximizing what we could do with the current set of facts. But the book deals with the question of whether, given how young the world population is, we'll ever be able to create enough employment to eliminate extreme poverty and create upward mobility in every society. And there's literally an honest debate about it. When I was president, for example, I was lucky. We had enormous growth of information technology. It moved out of Silicon Valley and the video game companies in Texas and the exchange companies in the Northern Virginia area into every aspect of the American economy. 8% of our employment, 20% of our job growth, 35% of our wage growth. It's one big reason we all grew together for the only time since the 1970s. But many people now believe that the technological advances are so quick that we're not ever going to be able to catch up. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm glad that Jim and Gallup are helping John to try to prove it ain't so. Because there is still so much we can do by making the model that we have now work better. And that's really what all of you can do. Essentially, at any given stage in its development, market economics or capitalism has three actual or potential problems that we have to address. It tends to self-destruct without rules to keep people from going over the edge. Anything that sounds too good to be true sooner or later probably is. Witness the financial crisis. So the trick is to have enough rules to keep craziness from happening without so many rules that you shut the engine down and kill the goose that laid the golden egg. And there are endless debates about it. Secondly, every market is self-contained in a way that cannot possibly take into account all the impacts of whatever the activity is. Economists call them externalities. So if we get rich by burning carbon, we'll create climate change. That's the most obvious externality today. I like fracking because I think it's helped us actually to reduce emissions, but only if the wellheads work right and you don't release methane, because methane's a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon. Externalities. John Lewis, when I was president and he was a congressman, was the principal sponsor of a bill we had to try to provide funding to clean up toxic waste sites in poor neighborhoods around America. At one point, the activities that spawned that toxic waste put a lot of people to work at pretty good wages, but when the enterprise was done and the people had moved, the folks that were left behind were worried about the health of their children. That's an externality. We need to fix that. And then the third thing that could happen is that the whole system shuts down because it runs itself out by concentrating so much wealth in so few hands that an economy that depends, for example, every advanced economy depends on somewhere between 50 and 70% of its GDP on consumption. And you can't have a consumption-based economy if people don't have any money to buy things to consume. And that is a serious problem here. It's a serious constraint on growth in America. There are at least 8 countries, according to all the recent surveys, that finally have more social mobility, meaning your kids can do better than you, than the United States does. And every single one of them has less income inequality and more ladders to rise, which is why getting involved in these kinds of projects is so very, very important. Just an article in the paper today saying more than half of the kids in public schools in America today come from low-income families for the first time. There are about 15% at or below the poverty line in America, but another third of our people spend a couple of months a year on incomes that would put them below the poverty line. Around the world, there's still 1 billion people living on less than $1.25 a day. More than 2 billion on less than $2 a day. In Haiti, where I spent a lot of time working in the last 5 years, almost 6 now, before the earthquake, 70% of the people lived on less than $2 a day. Poorest country in our own neighborhood. 60 million kids in this world never go to school, and probably twice that many go to schools without adequate learning materials or trained teachers. Government action does matter. You can make a difference. I just had the 10th anniversary of my opening of my presidential library, and we did a day on the foundation and a day on my administration, and somebody asked me what the most important thing I'd done as president was, and I said, I think proving that inclusive economics works better than trickle-down economics was pretty important. It's the only time that we've all grown together. When the bottom 20% of our working people increase their incomes by 23.6% in 8 years, exactly the same as the top 5%. And one of my liberal friends said, oh, come on, 23.6% of $1 million is a lot more than 23.6% of $30,000. I said, not if you're making the $30,000 and you got 2 kids at home and you know you're never going to make $1 million. No, it's not. That 23.6% is yours, and it's a piece of your future, and it's what makes this system work. So, yes, it matters. We're supposed to empower people. John mentioned the Community Reinvestment Act. The banks making community development, small business, and home mortgage loans to workers with modest incomes made $800 billion worth of loans in those 8 years, about 90% of all the money loaned through that time under the Community Reinvestment Act. And when the financial crash occurred, those that were compliant with the Community Reinvestment Act were actually less likely to fail than banks as a whole, because they were tied to the community, because they had been investing in real things that may have less sensational returns in the first 6 months, but over any decade will be stronger because the community itself will be stronger. So, yes, government can make a difference, but there is always, always going to be a gap between what the government can provide and the private sector will produce. Those externalities that aren't dealt with are the people that fall between the cracks, or the system that's not working as well as it used to because it's not expanding to include more and more people as it should. That's what you're here about. I know earlier today we had you had a forum, and a very impressive woman to me, Madhuri Kamareddy, who runs Hillary's Job One project at our foundation, was one of the participants. We think giving people their first job is a big deal. We think if you put people on the conveyor belt of success and you do a good job of it, they may not ever fall off. And you add to the work. We have a action network at the Clinton Global Initiative now, private partners helping to do this first job. And I'm very grateful for the companies that are here that have helped us with that. JP Morgan Chase and Cimatech. We have a Haiti Action Network that's raised $500 million for Haiti, almost all of it to try to help create jobs. And Coca-Cola has been one of our great partners in trying to help do things that will promote the economy. They're the only operation with a better distribution system than I've got it in some of these countries where we work. So they're important, and usually they partner with some non-governmental group to help. Corporate culture matters to bringing in people. So I know that a lot of the companies that are in this Job One program really believe in that sort of thing. But here's what I want to say. I believe that in the end, any non-governmental organization, including ours, that works as a charity only should be trying to put itself out of business. Because the only thing that is sustainable is a living you can earn and keep and give to somebody else. And so, and I'll give you any, but I want to encourage you all. You're sitting there thinking, well, look, old Bill Clinton was president. He can go out and raise a few $1 billion and do all this stuff, and what can I do? It doesn't work like that. I'm just like you. I do things that don't work, and I have to have the discipline to stop. Even now, I find it hard to acknowledge that I tried this and it didn't work. It seemed like such a good idea at the time. I just can't stand it, even now. Old as I am, I can't bear it. But what I want to encourage you to do is not to get discouraged. And just realize that the people we're working with have got to be able to make a living. Our foundation started when AIDS was running wild in Africa and the Caribbean and in Central Europe, and there was no global fund on AIDS, TB, and malaria. There was no president's emergency plan that President Bush passed, his finest act as president, I think, to put $3 billion a year into fighting AIDS and malaria. None of that was there. Nelson Mandela and I were going around the world sort of shaking a tin cup trying to raise money. And I want to tell you this story because every example of financial literacy or job training or hiring somebody or economic empowerment starts like this. So Mandela and I, in 2002, were asked to close the Global AIDS Conference in Barcelona, Spain. We did. And we rattled our cup as hard as we could rattle it. And all of a sudden, this dapper man who was a friend of mine named Denzel Douglas came up to me, who is a medical doctor and was then, and ironically is now again on his second track, the Prime Minister of the small Caribbean nation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And Denzel was, at the time, the head of the group of Caribbean nations' efforts against AIDS. So he came up to me and he said, look, Bill, he said, I know there's a lot of stigma and discrimination associated with AIDS, not in the Caribbean. We don't have a stigma problem. We don't have a discrimination problem. We got a money and organization problem. I said, well, Denzel, what do you want me to do about it? He said, I want you to fix it. Now, at the time, I had to raise $150 million to build my library, and I had 8 employees. And I said, okay. I didn't have a clue. But here's what I found out. We were paying $10,000 at our AIDS clinic in Harlem for AIDS medicine for a year. You were, taxpayers. The generic medicine was available at $500. But it was clear to me when I looked at the volumes, there were only 200,000 people in the whole world who were getting AIDS medicine at the time. More than 6 million needed the medicine to stay alive. And when I looked at it, it was clear that the generic AIDS business, which was largely concentrated in India with one big company in South Africa, was being run like a jewelry store in a small neighborhood in Atlanta. You ever go into a little family-owned jewelry store? Big markup, right? And there has to be. Why? Because you don't want to look at just one watch, just one bracelet, just one ring. You want to look. So you got to keep a hefty inventory, although you know your volume's going to be small. And besides, the payment's a little uncertain. Somebody might break the engagement off. I mean, think about it. It's pretty scary. I can't think of anything to be scarier to me than to try to open a jewelry store tomorrow. I'd be terrified. Because it's a low volume, high margin, uncertain payment business. That's the way the AIDS. We were dealing with a global epidemic with that. We needed a grocery chain model. Massive volume, very low profit margin per unit, but absolutely certain payment. So I got Canada and Ireland to agree to commit $20 million a year each for 5 years to a country they could choose from a laundry list. And I said, I don't want to touch the money. I just don't want you to release it till I say it's okay. And we went around organizing this. We were starting the Caribbean, and here's what I learned from the business model. The Bahamas, the wealthiest country in the Caribbean, was the only country providing AIDS medicine then. And they were treating 700 people with that generic medicine that was $500. You know what they were paying for that medicine? $3,500. Why? Because nobody understood anything about the AIDS market, and it was going through 2 different agents who were taking a whopping deal. So 4 days after we started this project, I got them the medicine for $500 plus the cost of shipping, and they could treat 6 people for every 1 person they were treating before. Now we did that, but I thought this is going to be easy. That was the easiest day we ever had. But here's what happened. Over time, we worked with the providers and we improved their production, we improved their distribution, we got them an absolutely certain payment, and the price dropped from $500 to $190 to $160 to $120, eventually to $90. And the price of children's medicine dropped from $600 eventually down to $60. And then when the 3 pills became 1, we got that down to $200 and less than that. And today, thanks to all the money and everything that's come up, there are about 14.5 to 15 million people alive on AIDS medicine, 8.6 million of them off contracts negotiated by our foundation. Now, here's the deal. We have a strict no corruption policy, and I've only handled the money for one country for a year and a half. Otherwise, we just direct the money to them and they do it. Now, why am I telling you this? Because all those drug manufacturers that are saving all those lives, they're making way more money today than they were before. They're just making money in an inclusive way. Inclusive capitalism works better than exclusive capitalism. And I'll give you another example that involves Atlanta's Coca-Cola and my neighbor in Westchester County, PepsiCo and Cadbury Schweppes and others. I got interested in this childhood obesity problem after I had my open heart surgery a little more than 10 years ago. And the high rates of obesity increase dramatically the rate of type 2 diabetes, and diabetes and its consequences claim about 25% of all the taxpayer spending in the Medicaid program for low-income people. It's staggering. And they take away productive years, and it's awful. And it's really awful because now we know you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes and liberate people from it through proper diet and exercise and other things. So essentially, this is a highly edited version of the conversation that our foundation had with the major soft drink manufacturers. I know you care about this. And I know you're not trying to make these kids sick. And I know you know it's not good for you because they're not going to be able to buy soft drinks when they're 35 if they're in a wheelchair having had a leg amputated with diabetes. There is no demon here, but over time, as more and more people had to work longer hours, had less disposable income, had less time to prepare food, we changed the way we were consuming food. We changed the food we were consuming. And with limited incomes, we got to buying food that was high in bulk and filling, but low in nutrition. That was dangerous. Nobody exactly planned it the way it turned out to be, but it's not sustainable. So let's figure out a way you can make money and turn the ship around before it hits the iceberg. And they agreed to get rid of all the full sugar soft drinks in vending machines and school cafeterias. They agreed to supplement it with fruit-flavored waters. They agreed even to go to lower-fat milk. They agreed to smaller portions of processed juice because it's got a lot of sugar in it. And here's the bottom line. After 4 years, 2 separate independent evaluators said that these companies, with no tax, no government regulation, no anything, had voluntarily reduced the calories shipped to schools in drinks by 90%. 90%. Now, here's what I'm saying. They're not losing money, they're making money in a different way. So when you go out to tell somebody or try to argue within your company, we need to train more people. We need to start more apprenticeship programs. We need to hire more people who are first-timers. We need to do this, that, or the other thing. You got to make an argument that over the long run it is good economics, and then you have to make it good economics, and no government program can do that. You have to do that. You have to do that. give you one more. After the tsunami in South Asia in 2004, the first President Bush and I worked and helped raise money in America and created a fund and tried to help. And then the UN asked me to stay on for a couple of years. We had all these wonderful people in Indonesia and Sri Lanka and Southeast India who had been killed in the tsunami, whose family members wanted to go back to sea, or people who survived but their boats didn't. And so we said, if you want to go back, we gave them a choice between their old wooden boats and a more durable but less comfortable aluminum boat. They chose all that. But then I had nothing to do with this. I was just there leading the parade. But one of the people that knew something about the economics of fishing in these areas said, let's give them all a cell phone. And I said, why? He said, because these people have no money, and when they come in from fishing all day, they do not have a clue what the real price of fish is. And we think a lot of them are being ripped off every single day. They just don't know what the market is. They weren't in a market economy if they had no idea what the market price was. So we got the money together and gave everybody a cell phone. The average fisherman's income in all the islands affected by the tsunami in the coastal areas went up 30% with the cell phone. So that's really what you're here talking about. John mentioned Muhammad Yunus and microcredit. I love these microcredit programs. I was visiting one in Tanzania the other year before last that one of our partners set up, and I went in a little beauty shop that a woman had doubled in size. 24-year-old woman was making more money than she ever dreamed. We have farming programs in Malawi and Rwanda and other places. We put together 20,000 farmers around a big anchor farm that's like an agricultural experiment station in America. And most of these farmers are women, and most of them farm an acre or less with only a hoe. And sometimes their hoe doesn't even have a long handle. Sometimes it's just a handheld hoe. After 1 year, this is what happened. We put them together and we bargained for lower prices and higher volumes in fertilizer and seed. We got better fertilizer and better seed at lower cost. The guys making the fertilizer and seed, they still made money. They just made it in a different way. And all African farmers especially tend to lose half their income after they harvest the crop because they have no rolling transportation down these horrible roads, so they pay somebody else half their earnings just to get it to market. And they have no storage, so even if it would increase the price by 30%, if they held for 2 or 3 weeks, they can't do it. We fixed all that. First year, our 20,000 farmers, listen to this, increased their incomes by an average of 576%. And nobody lost money. Everybody they were dealing with made more money. So that's how you have to see yourself. By building a more inclusive economy and developing people's innate abilities, you are making a market work. The only way it can work over the long run, by getting better, by expanding the circle of participation. And I just want you to believe you can do it. Because a lot of this stuff we did, we started really small. If you had told me the day we made the call to the Indian drug manufacturer who was shipping through 2 agents to the Bahamas just to get him to ship direct, and I promised him payment in a prompt way, that it would all come to this, I never would have believed it. You can all do this. When I met Muhammad Yunus 32 years ago, next month, and started talking to him about microcredit, there had only been one microcredit program in America then on the south side of Chicago. involving African American carpenters and Croatian electricians who got co-op credit to save some of the buildings on the south side that were going to be razed, and in the process created economic opportunity for themselves. You go over there today, you'll be glad those buildings weren't torn down, and that they found a way to work together. And it is true, you heard John say that. I did campaign relentlessly for him to get the Nobel Prize because he was an economist who could measure the progress of his life not in the books he'd written and the books he'd sold, but the lives he'd changed. There were, in Bangladesh, Eunice's native country, has two great microcredit banks, BRAC and the Grameen Bank. I'll tell you how important they are. And they're making loans that average $50 or less, right? In this last decade, for years, the country was paralyzed politically. It, in effect, had no national government. Every day was conflict. And yet that country averaged 6% growth because they had made so many loans at the bottom of the pyramid, and the poor people were paying their loans back, that they were growing anyway. They revolutionized things. So I figured that it would be a good idea if the Nobel Committee recognized economics as if people mattered. And so after Eunice's ceremony, I wanted to go and couldn't go. He gave his little speech and he got on the phone and he called me. He said, "You'll never believe what the guy said when he handed me my Nobel Prize." I thought he was going to say, "Congratulations, thank you for all your work." He gives me the prize and he says, "Maybe Bill Clinton will stop calling me now." But I'm telling you this because inclusive economics is the key to America's future, to the world's future. Operation Hope, going into the Middle East, is really important. Giving all those young people something to look forward to, something positive, something that is unifying, is important. In the aftermath of this horrible thing in France, I said, it's great. He's going to Morocco. The king of Morocco is a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Ordered the total restoration of every standing synagogue in the country. Think about that. And the Moroccan Jews that went to Israel have been told that if any of them want to come home ever, they will be welcome to their ancestral land and treated equally as brothers and sisters. That's the kind of future we got to build. Inclusive politics, inclusive economics. And like many of you, I have seen the movie Selma. And I actually thought it was really good. I know there were some historical arguments about it, but here's the point I wanted to make. I was a student, a senior at Georgetown when Martin Luther King was murdered in Memphis. I'm from Arkansas, so I knew exactly where he was going and what he was doing. And when Washington exploded in flames, I had a white 1963 Buick, and I put a red cross on it, and I took supplies to people in inner city Washington that were basically hiding and sleeping in church basements because they didn't know if they could safely go outside. I have a vivid memory of all this. At the end of his life, Dr. King was preparing for the Poor People's Campaign and the March on Washington, and saw, I believe, going to help the garbage workers in Memphis as a step along the way. But he also understood something we still see today, that basically, he said, our white brothers and sisters who are working people have been persuaded that we are the enemy, and we got more in common with them than they know, and we need to get out of this mess together. And so I'll give you an example. Something that all of you should think about. Several months ago, the administration announced in Washington that they wanted the Environmental Protection Agency to limit carbon emissions to try to make sure America was leading the fight against climate change. That is a good deal. It's a laudable goal. Just today, we see in the press that 2014 was the hottest year ever recorded. And every single year, the climate scientists, 97% of them, tell us the same thing. Now, I got to tell you, this is a hoot to me, because I wasn't very much use to anybody during the last campaign season. I told everybody I was useless because I wasn't mad at anybody. And apparently you need to be very, very angry to have anybody. So I'm just not any good at this anymore. I don't know. But I am a grandfather now. That's probably why I'm not mad at anybody. And here's the deal. I cannot think of any other area where if you are a parent or a grandparent and someone came to you and said, 97% of the people who make a living doing this and know something about it say this bad thing is going to happen if you don't do this. I can't think of any other area where every parent and every grandparent would say, I think I'll side with the 97%. Here you got all these people saying, that's inconvenient for me. I believe the 3%. I'm going to put my kids and grandkids in the hands of the 3%. Is there any other issue you would do that? No. Why are we doing it? Partly because nobody has offered an inclusive economics response to the challenge of climate change. Those coal miners in West Virginia and Kentucky didn't do anything wrong. And they're not dumb. They know they lost most of their jobs because the Wyoming coal is lower sulfur, because of the natural gas revolution and its lower sulfur. They don't really enjoy tearing the tops off their beautiful wooded mountains to get to the coal seams. They don't know what else to do. A huge percentage of perfectly able-bodied people are now living on disability payments because they don't have anything else to do. You really think they want to be wards of the state? Of course not. If you live that way, wouldn't you be full of resentment and anger and frustration? So I don't have any problem with us doing what we have to do to deal with climate change, but we owe those people a different tomorrow. And we haven't provided a different tomorrow. And they are entitled to it. That's another reason we need inclusive economics. And another reason Operation Hope is so important. Look, we can do this. The economy's producing a lot of jobs now. If it keeps going for another several months, finally the market will get tight enough that you'll see wages start to rise again. But we're still going to have too many people left out unless you become an agent of change. Because we have been in the backwater for long enough now that there are people we got to go back and pick up, that we've got to bring on. You know as well as I do, this is true. So if you want shared prosperity and you want to deal with the whole capitalist system so that America has the greatest economy in the world and we can help bring these other economies along outside our country, we got to go back and pick up the people that are left out and left behind. We've got to build inclusive economics. And if we succeed at it, before you know it, we'll have more inclusive politics because people won't be so mad every time an election shows up, and instead they'll be thinking about what can we do to make more good things happen. And so I just ask you to think about that. This really, really matters. Not long after I got out of the White House and I was up in Harlem with my foundation trying to think of things we could do to help New York, I asked John to help me get more people who were eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit to claim it. At the time, there were 100,000 people in New York City alone who were eligible for that tax credit who did not claim it. And we began to work together again. I've watched this guy work miracles before. We need to do many more things. On the way down here, I read the inaugural address of Georgia's Republican governor, Nathan Deal, who just got reelected. And one of the nicest things about his inaugural address was a passionate and, as nearly as I could see, completely genuine call for reducing the size of the prison and jail population, getting minor offenders out, and putting them back to work. Now, this is a long way from eliminating any support for college education in prisons, which is what happened 20 years ago. We have a chance for all the partisan differences in America to come together around this idea of a reasonable reduction in the size of our incarcerated population and preparing people who get out to live a more productive life. This is an enormous opportunity for Operation Hope. But there is no Operation Hope if you're I used to run a big prison system. I know about this. If you're the person, I mean, when I was governor, not when I was president. I never was a warden or anything. But I know a lot about this. When somebody is released and they walk through that door, they don't think about Operation Hope or the federal government or the biggest employer in there. There's somebody standing there or there's not. There is a real live body, a person who either cares about this person or does not. And this is an enormous opportunity for us. It will free up all kinds of money for other more productive investments, either leaving it in the hands of the taxpayers or having the government put it back into education so that we can stop bankrupting people trying to send their kids to college. There's a lot of things we can do here. But it won't happen with just the government and the private sector. There's got to be a non-governmental, private citizens doing public good effort. You matter. You matter. You have to know this. You don't have to be as dedicated as John. You don't have to give your whole life over to it, but you got to give some time to it. You got to give some knowledge to it. You got to make a commitment to evangelize a little bit to get some other people to do what you're doing. But if you do, I just want to tell you from my point of view, like I said, I'm not here as a politician. I'm here as a citizen. I do not believe there is a country in the world that is any better positioned for the 21st century than ours. We are diverse. We are young. We have everything we need. But we spend too much time fighting and too little time working together. And we think we think our differences are more important than our common humanity, which contradicts the teachings of every religion and the science of human genome, which tells us that we are all 99.5% the same, at least. Which means, if you look around this room, pretty diverse crowd, right? Every non-age related difference you can see in this room is rooted in 0.5% of your genome. Your sex, your race, your eye color, your hair color, your shape, the whole 9 yards. We spend 99.5% of our time thinking about that 0.5%. Don't we? And I'm not just talking about politics. Oh, if I'd had LeBron James's body, I could have done in a different line of work. And respectfully, you're here, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't giving more than average thought to the 99.5% of you that you share with every other breathing human being on this planet. And I'm just telling you, we're in good shape. But the future will belong to the people who do the best job of creating networks of cooperation that build inclusive economics, inclusive societies, inclusive politics. To the people who find a way to drill down deep in our psyches to convince us that we got more to gain by joining hands and working together than by tearing each other to smithereens. That we can't afford to lose all these kids we're losing today. And it doesn't matter much what their race is or where they're living or anything else. They're ours. We're going up or down together. Whether we believe it or not, at some point, the most exclusive economics will become inclusive. It'll just be inclusive failure instead of inclusive success. And so, just one last thing I want to say, because we got a lot of bankers in the crowd. And I say that with great admiration. It's an important job. One of my favorite programs that my foundation does works with mostly native Indian women living way up in the Andes in Peru. Most of them have never made any kind of living before. And they participate in a program to distribute consumer goods in very remote villages where people never get them. And we let these women pick these consumer goods out of a catalog. We have, a lot of major providers, Procter & Gamble, Nescafe, others that give us the goods. And they pick what they want. They sign in for it. They load up a backpack, unless they're going to a village, in which case we give them a table to sell. And they set off in the mountains to sell. They pay nothing. They get it all on consignment. They're making money for the first time in their lives. They're serving people with consumer goods they've never been able to buy before. And so far, we have not lost $1. Not one. Most poor people are exceedingly honorable and appreciate a chance to do something. So there's something out there for you to do. Now, we hadn't helped 8.6 million of them yet. We haven't even helped as many people as are benefiting from the soft drink program or a lot of other things, but boy, it's a good start. I want you to think about that. Don't worry about the fact that you hadn't been president. Don't worry about the fact that you're not John Hope Bryant. Do what you can. And realize that you are part of a vast fabric of citizens trying to fill the gap between what the government can provide and the economy will produce. And you, and only you, can build us a market of inclusive economics. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Okay. Did he give you everything he had? Did he give it to you? World, everything he had? I want to thank Mayor Kasim Reed for co-hosting this. I see him in the audience. He's produced a bunch of jobs for Atlanta, bringing Mercedes here and other companies here to Atlanta. As Van Jones would say, the best way to stop a bullet is a job. Thank you for that. Mayor Dugan of Detroit and all the other heroes and sheroes here. Let me get to this. Now, probably the best compliment I ever got was President Clinton doesn't know anything I'm about to say. Staff people with President Clinton came to me one day at CGI, great institutions, Clinton Global Initiative, and said, John, you remind me of a black Bill Clinton. And while I'm enjoying that moment, another staffer said, nope, Bill Clinton's a black Bill Clinton. Some of you get that, some of you don't. The coolest president we have ever had on the planet. When he moved to Harlem, he called me to teach a financial literacy course in a Harlem school. When he moved to Harlem, Secret Service is trying to walk him down the street. Not quite. They knew he had to go to Harlem. They didn't know he had to live in Harlem. And a brother runs up, running real fast. Mr. President, Secret Service turns, not knowing how to handle this. President Clinton pushes his hands between them. He said, Mr. President, you are my main man. What a great compliment. It says so much about him. Last couple points. Nobody says it. He sent me, him and his wife, 10 years ago, you probably don't remember this, sent me a $20,000 check out of their personal checkbook to support our work. I didn't ask him for a dime. He did it to encourage me. Wow. After Hurricane Katrina, he asked me to go do some work to help with him and his foundation. We did. I didn't ask him for a dime. He asked us for a budget. I sent a budget, $500,000. He reviewed the budget personally. He sent $700,000. And then made sure we did an audit and did the work. And whenever I talk to his daughter, Chelsea, it is never about her. It is never about politics. It is never about partisanship. It is always about serving people, about their prison population, about young people on the border. Mr. President, your greatest legacy, you and your wife, is that daughter you've created, Chelsea Clinton. She is going to change the world. So I just want you to know a little bit about him as a person. And so I can't give him an award that says President of the World. I'd like to. I can't honor him like he's going to be honored tonight. That is the greatest honor anybody can get, and everybody needs to go to the King Center dinner. But what I can do is give him the first award ever produced by Operation Hope, the founding Civil Rights to Silver Rights Award, to the best civil rights president the world has ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, President Bill Clinton. While President Bill Clinton is being President Bill Clinton, I want to thank Tina, his chief of staff, without whom this would have happened, Jonathan, Ami, Margaret, all those on his staff who don't get credit for doing the great work and do it anyway, his President Clinton's foundation team, CGI team, Clinton Global Initiative, CGI America. Have you enjoyed today?